So you're thinking about starting a TPT store in 2026, but maybe you aren't sure where to start. Maybe you have an idea of where to start, but you want to make sure you cross all of your T's and dot all of your I's. Don't worry, I've got you covered in today's video. Hello, YouTube fam. It's Chantel, the face behind the teacher mindset, and welcome back to another video. Whether you dream of starting your TPT store to share your love of creating in the classroom with other teachers, or maybe you want to make a little extra money on the side, or maybe your goal is to turn this into a full-time business. These TPT tips in today's video will help you get started. Today, I'm sharing 10 tips that every new TPT seller should know before pressing the publish button on that first resource. Some of these tips are things that I wish I knew before I got started, which would have definitely helped to save a little time and a lot of headaches. The goal of this video is for me to share these tips with you so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. Tip number one when getting your TPT store started is to pick your niche. They say that one of the biggest mistakes that newbies can make when starting their TPT store is trying to make resources that sell to everyone. Something that I've learned over the last few years is that you'll sell more when your resources have a clear focus and audience. When I first started my TPT store, my niche was selling pre-K resources because I was a pre-K teacher at the time. And even as I've gone on in this journey, I've narrowed down that niche a little bit more. And now I kind of focus a lot of my resources around selling pre-K literacy resources. The top two categories of resources in my store are overwhelmingly sight words resources for pre-K and kindergarten students and classroom decor for preschool. And I mean, it's not even close. For like every 10 resources that I sell in my store, 8 of them are probably going to be sight words resources. Another one is going to be a classroom decor piece. And then one is going to be one of the other 200 resources that I have in my store. And honestly, I'm not even mad at that. These are my anchor resources. It's how a lot of people are finding me through the TPT search, how they're making it to my page, and ultimately they're finding things that they love. Whether it be selling social emotional resources, classroom decor, literacy, math, all of these teacher sellers have one thing in common, and is that they found their lane. They primarily stick to creating resources in that lane, and ultimately it helps them to sell more resources. As I mentioned before, pre-K literacy resources, and more specifically sight words resources, are the anchor resource of my store. My sight words resources account for about 85% of my lifetime sales in the past 5+ years of me being on TPT. The two resources that really helped my store take off in this category were my Dolch pre-K sight words practice sheets and my Dolch kindergarten sight words practice sheets. One thing that helped me with these two resources is that I created a small free sample of the Dolch pre-K sight words resource. So I think there's about 40 or so plus words in the Dolch pre-K sight words list. I took about 8 to 10 of them. I created that as a small freebie, which gives people visiting my store an opportunity to try out the resource in a little snippet. And when they like it, they ultimately come back and they purchase the bundle. So that was a little trick that helped me to kind of get that resource taken off. And as you can see, now it accounts for about 85% of my sales, as I mentioned before. So hold on to that little note about freebies. We're going to talk about that a little later on in the video. The second tip that I have for anyone looking to start their TPT store is that copyright rules are not an option. For the record, this is one area that I did not mess around with. I wanted to make sure that I was paying attention to TPT's strict copyright rules and enforcing them with my products from day one. Using fonts, clip arts, or pictures from any owner in your TPT work without their express written consent can get your resource removed, or even worse, can get your TPT store shut down. This rule also applies to free resources. So to understand copyright rules a little bit more, let's talk about the difference between personal use and commercial use. Something that is marked free for personal use can only be used in your own classroom or for personal projects. If there's an image that you're really excited about using, but the owner of that piece of work marks their work as free for commercial use, then unfortunately you cannot use their piece of work in your original resources. And again, I do want to stress that this also applies to any free resources that you're making. Using something for personal use has nothing to do with whether or not you're making a profit off of that resource or you're giving it away for free. Again, if you're going to take someone else's work, incorporate it into your work, you need to make sure that they have marked that piece of clip art, font, whatever it is, as free for commercial use. Another little mini tip inside of this tip is to never assume that anything that you want to use is free for commercial use. You want to make sure that you do your work to look through that particular artist's terms of conditions and really see what they have actually outlined that piece of work to be used for. So how do you know if something is good to use for personal or good to use for commercial? Again, as I mentioned, you want to start by using that particular owner or artist's terms of conditions. I always like to start there. Typically in the terms of conditions section, they will outline how someone else can use their work, whether they can use it, as I mentioned, commercially, meaning that you can incorporate their work into your work as long as you are turning it into something original. Or they might again say that it's for personal use, meaning you can take that piece off of the internet, you can incorporate it into a little project that you're doing with your class, but you cannot turn around and then use their work in any type of resource that you're going to give to other people. If you're looking to incorporate fonts or clip arts into your TPT resources, I would say the safest place to start by finding resources that you can use would be to purchase from other TPT authors. TPT is a platform where teachers are selling to other teachers. There are a lot of artists or authors on the platform that are strictly clip art artists, meaning that their entire store is just selling clip art, or their entire store might be selling different types of fonts. And most likely they're going to be selling something that you can then use commercially, meaning you can purchase their font, you can purchase their clip art, and you can use it to make your own work. If you're using outside sites like Canva or Flat Icon, I would just check with their terms of use. I know with Canva, if you have a paid subscription, you can use a lot of the photos that you see in the library or clip arts or fonts in your work commercially. They may restrict that when you're using a free account, so you definitely want to double check that. A site like flaticon.com allows you to use the clip arts from other artists for commercial use. If you have a free account, as long as you are properly crediting the original author. If you have a paid account, which is what I have just to protect myself, they allow you to use it commercially without having to credit the author. But I go the extra step anyway, and I always credit the author, even if they tell me that I don't have to. Another little mini tip inside of this much broader tip about copyright is to never source your photos from a random Google search. That is like a no. Just because the photo is used online, you can find it on Google, you can find it in a basic image search, does not mean that you have the right to use that commercially. Using an artist's work, again, without their express written consent can get your store in serious trouble. So whatever you do, I would say if you're gonna find a photo off of Google that you really love, I would really go ahead and do the work to see if you can find who the original owner of the work is, see if you can find any trace of their terms and conditions, and again, read those and see how they have outlined their work to be used before you go ahead and stick it into your work. I'm going to share a little mini story about a resource that I just created for my TPT store. It's actually a free resource, and it's my 100th day of school project. I originally created this project in my classroom several years ago. It was essentially looking at the current year, which at the time was 2021, I believe, or 2022 when I used it in my class. And I wanted to do something different for the 100th day of school. Instead of like counting to 100 or sorting 100, doing those typical projects that you see in a pre-K classroom around the 100th day of school, I wanted to take a trip back in time 100 years prior to that. So 2021 was when we did it. And so we looked at what the world was like in 1921. So I took a bunch of random images off of the internet that kind of showed what the world looked like at the time in 1921. I shared who the president of the United States was. I shared what cars look like. I shared like some of our favorite hobbies or activities were back in 1921. And then I also found in our local library archive pictures of what our city looked like in 1921. And we took a look at those and compared them to what they look like today. And then for the second half of that project, we predicted what the future would look like in 100 years, which was 2121. So my students all drew pictures, and we added some text to what they think the world would be like 100 years from now. So it was taking a look at, a 200-year time span, seeing how much the world has changed in those 100 years and making our predictions. Now, I loved this resource, but I knew that in its state that I was using it in the classroom, I could not put that in my TPT store, because a lot of the photos that I, again, used for that resource were grabbed from a basic Google search. Now, I was using it in my classroom for personal use only. I wasn't selling this in any way, so I wasn't violating any of the copyright rules of using those sources, because they are for personal use only. But I wanted to take this resource and somehow figure out a way to make it fit within the copyright rules so that I could give this resource to other teachers. So what I ended up doing was I had to change. Sorry, my nose is a little itchy in this video. In order for me to use this resource, I had to change out I had to change out all of the photos, and I ended up having to switch around some of the examples that I used. So I created this resource to be something that wasn't like 1 year specific to go in my TPT store. I made it about the decade. So I looked at the decade of the 1920s compared to the current decade that we're in, which is the 2020s. And in order for me to find enough photos that I could use commercially, that was kind of the way that I was able to work around it. Trying to find a specific photo for a specific thing from 1926 was definitely way too hard. So again, I changed the resource to make it kind of about the decade of 100 years ago. And I sourced all of the photos from Canva's library. Again, I am a Canva Pro subscriber, so I can use the photos that are in Canva for commercial use. And I switched around what I was able to find. I kind of worked the resource around the photos that were available. I put those in that resource, I recreated it, and now I can put it in my store for commercial use. So again, copyright is not an option. You want to make sure that your resources are following strict copyright rules, because you don't want to get any copyright strikes or ultimately have your store taken down. Tip number 3 for all new TPT sellers is to always secure and flatten your resources. Just as we want to make sure that we're not stealing someone else's original work, we also want to protect ourselves and make sure that others aren't stealing our original work. Securing or flattening your images is the first step to help to make sure that you are properly securing your work and that others cannot simply copy your original work, paste it into their product, and then resell it. So what does it mean to flatten your resource? Flattening your resource simply means to turn all of the different layers of your resource, like the text, the images, the clip art, the background, is essentially taking all of those layers and smushing them together and making your resource one simple layer, or essentially like turning it into a photo. Now, why do we want to do this? This makes it a lot harder for someone to take your resource, whether it be free or purchase, to simply copy a layer out of it and then paste it into their resource and then sell it. Flattening your image essentially keeps all of your details in place. It makes sure that the quality of the work is high quality, the way that you've created it. But again, it just makes it a little bit harder for someone else to be able to take credit for your work. Now, there is a little bit of a caveat to this. If you are creating an editable resource, so for example, if I'm giving a teacher a template, right? I want them to be able to use this template, but there's a section in there where they can go in and maybe change the title. They can add words. The first template that's coming to my mind is like a newsletter template, right? So you want to give the teacher the kind of overall look and feel of the template, but you want them to be able to go ahead and add their text into there so they can complete the resource and then use it in their classroom. You want to make sure that those layers that can be edited by the teacher or the person that's purchasing your resource, those layers you want to stay against unflattened, for lack of a better word. So you don't want that to be kind of flattened into a single layer, because anything that's flattened ultimately cannot be edited. There are a few different ways that you can flatten your resource. So it really just depends on which program you're creating your resource in. When I first got started, I created all of my resources in Microsoft PowerPoint because that was what I had access to. And so I started by doing like the old school way that a lot of people on TPT teach you how to flatten your resources, which is to essentially create your resource, turn all of the slides within your resource into a PNG image, and then insert those PNG images back into your resource as the background, which ultimately was like the way of flattening them. Now, as I begin to sell some resources, make a little bit of additional money, and be able to put that back and invest in better tech and resources for my store, I then went and purchased an extension to Microsoft PowerPoint called Flatpak. Flatpak is a simple one-time purchase. You can buy it from the TPT marketplace, whether you have PC, there's Flatpak for PC, or if you have a Mac, you'll go ahead and purchase it for Mac. You'll get the instructions on how to install it into your computer, and it attaches to your Microsoft PowerPoint. You'll then see it as like one of the little bars that come up, and it takes that entire flattening process from a 20-minute process down to like a 2-minute process. So instead of having to save all of your work, put it into PNG images, open up a new document, and then insert one by one by one back into the background, you can just take your original document that you made. You'll just select all of the layers that you want to be flattened within each of the slides. You press a button, and then boom, your entire document is flattened just like that. And then anything that you leave unclicked, so if there's like a layer that, again, you want a teacher to be able to edit, you just leave that part unclicked, and it will flatten all the other pieces, and it'll leave that particular layer unflattened, which is like the best thing. I mean, Flatpak by far was like one of the first original investments that I made that just took my product creation to another level. It just saved me so much time. Now I create a little bit of a hybrid. I do some products in Microsoft PowerPoint, and I do some in Canva. If you're using a resource like Canva, when you go ahead to download your product, there is an option to flatten it. So it will do it right in Canva. But again, with Canva, it doesn't allow you to like distinguish if you want some layers to be left unflattened or some layers to be flattened. It just flattens everything. So Canva is great if you just want to like make a resource that can't be edited and you just want to flatten the whole thing. But if you have something that needs like certain layers to be left unlocked, for a lack of a better word, and some to not be touched, you probably want to use a software like Flatpak in Microsoft PowerPoint. Tip number 4 for all new TPT sellers would be to start with one high quality product. Now, it can be tempting to like throw a bunch of products together really quickly, just like throw them into your store and see what sells and what doesn't sell. But I promise you, if you start from the beginning and you make high quality products, even if it takes you a little bit more time, you are definitely going to see the results in the long run. Let me give you an example from my own TPT store. The very first product that I made for my TPT store were Google Keep headers. Now, at the time when I first started 5-6 years ago, however long it's been, Google Keep headers were like a dime a dozen. There were like a bunch of sellers that had like their own version of a Google Keep headers. And I started with this one because I thought that there was like a little bit of a flair in my design that I can bring to it. And I knew that like, even though there were other teachers that were creating their own, I had something unique to bring to that. And ultimately it really helped me to kind of define my style, like the color palettes, things like that, that I wanted to use. So I created this product as my first product. I took a painstakingly long time to actually bring this product to life. Now, I don't recommend taking as long as I did. I think it took like a month to finish this product. And a part of me took that long, not because it actually took that long to make the product. I think it just took that long because I wanted every single detail to be perfect. I had like 2 or 3 different like teacher authors who were like a part of my journey and helping me get started, like look it over. I wanted to make sure there were like no errors. I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. And then even when I got it perfect, I just got like nervous to like press the publish button because I'm like, once I press publish, like it's out there forever. And like I had that anxiety about it. So I definitely want to recommend going as extreme as I did, but ultimately taking the time, even if it's like 2 to 3 solid weeks of you like putting time and effort into a high quality resource from the beginning, is again, it's always going to benefit you because teachers will come back and purchase resources from an author that they know has high quality work. Even if you don't have like a ton of things in your store, if you've got like 50 products, but they are high quality and what people are looking for, you are going to have the sales. So really, really focus on making high quality products. And when I say high quality, like that can mean a bunch of different things. It can mean the actual visual appeal of it. It can be the actual content that you're putting into it. So you're making it high quality because you're giving the teacher a lot of quality materials that they can use with their students. That part of high quality is really up for you to decide. And every single niche is going to look different. Classroom decor is not only needs to be functional, but like high quality obviously would talk about the look of it, right? Decor, you want it to be visually appealing versus like a 7th grade math teacher probably is not going to care about like the color palette that you're using. They're going to want to know that like, hey, you have a lot of high quality examples that they can use to teach a math student. So again, what high quality means is really going to depend on your niche and the type of resources that you're making. But whatever that means to you, really, really take the time and effort to do just that. Now, pivoting back to my story about the Google Keep headers. Again, this was a resource that a lot of other authors were already making. It's a nice to have resource and not like a must have that teachers need in their classroom. But because they were high quality, I offered like an editable piece. I think it was like 100+ different Google Keep headers in different colors. Like, so I offered them like a lot for their money. I offered them an editable resource, which means they can create even more off of that. And I offered it for a very affordable price. It took this like nice to have product and turned it into something that like almost become a must have for people. And so it's another resource that I kind of put under my classroom decor like piece, even though it's not like really decor, but I would say I would bundle that one resource in with classroom decor, and that it's a pretty big high ticket item. Like it really helped to jumpstart my store, and it wasn't even like a pre-K resource for, you know, that I'm known for making now. So again, even if your products are nice to have and not necessarily must-haves. If you do a good job of making it high quality, there are going to be teachers out there who are still going to want to purchase it from you. That now brings us to tip number 5, and that is to use your freebie resources in your store intentionally. One thing a lot of people may not know, especially when you're starting a TPT store, is that the platform TPT actually requires your very first resource that you put up in your store to be a free resource. And really the goal behind this is that since you are a new TPT seller, the buyer pool is not familiar with your quality of work yet. And so they require that before you charge someone for a resource, the very first resource that you kind of give to the world is something for free. It allows teachers to be able to see your quality of work, to assess whether or not this is a author that they want to follow and keep in touch with and ultimately buy more resources for, which I think is a really great idea. And so you want to make sure that the very first resource you put into your store is the free resource. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't really take the time at the beginning to really start to hone in and to create that first paid resource for your store. It just can't be the first thing that you post into your store. So I definitely want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. Now, going back to my Google Keep headers, as I told you, that was the first paid resource that I had in my store, but it was also the first free resource that I had in my store. And this kind of ties back into the video a little bit earlier when I told you to hold on to that idea of a freebie. Here's where we're going to talk about that. So one thing that I did when I first started my store was I wanted to kind of work smarter, not harder. So I took my first paid resource, again, those Google Keep headers. I really worked on making it a high quality product. And then I doubled it into my free resource. So after I had come up with the full 190 Google Keep headers that you can purchase with the editable template, I took 13 of the more popular ones. I put them into a little bundle, and then I had that become my first free resource. So I essentially got 2 resources in my store right off the bat. I took a little sample of the Google Keep headers. I made it the first freebie so someone could come and ultimately try out a little sampling of it. And if they like it, then they're obviously gonna wanna keep the matching ones, right? Like, who wants to buy a Google Keep headers bundle with 2 or 3 headers that you really like, and then you're like, oh my God, I need the to-do list one that isn't included in the freebie. Okay, I've gotta go now buy the actual paid one so that I can have everything that I need. So that was kind of my thought process behind getting started. Was I used my paid resource, I took a little teeny sample of it, I gave it to you for free first, and then you can go try it out, you love it, now you want to buy the actual full paid resource. I use this same strategy for, as I told you before, my number 1 selling item in my store, and that is my site word resources. So I actually have some stats here to the date of actually creating this video. As I mentioned, I took my full pre-K Dolch site words practice sheets list. I took 8 to 10 out of the bundle of 40, some of the more popular site words in that bundle. I made it a little freebie, and it's hey, try it before you buy it. And then ultimately after teachers try it, they love it, and then they come back and they actually buy the full bundle. So with that, I looked at how many of the free version was downloaded, and to date I have over 70,000 downloads of the freebie. And again, I would say 80% of the sales in my store are the actual paid versions of that. That not only includes the actual paid version of the actual pre-K. So I only made a free version of the Dolch pre-K list, right? So I have over 70,000 free downloads of that one. But then teachers are coming, they're buying the full pre-K list, and then they're buying the full kindergarten list, and then they're buying the full first grade list, and then they're buying the full second grade list. So that one freebie is actually driving the sales for about the 5 or 6 products in my store. And that also includes the bundle because they all come bundled together. So this is a great way to use your freebies intentionally. If there are products that you really, really, really feel strongly about and you're like, people will definitely love this if they were able to get their hands on it, try it as a freebie. Send a copy, a little snippet to your mailing list. Go to TPT and fill out the form and ask them to feature your free resource in the upcoming newsletter that they're going to send to the who knows how many people they're going to send it to. Try to get a little snippet of it out there. Don't give too much away. Obviously, you still want people to want to buy it. If you give them too much of it for free, they may not want to necessarily buy it, but try that and see if it helps you. So now that we've made it to the end of tip number 5, I do want to take a quick break to say that if you are enjoying this video so far, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment below of which of the tips you've enjoyed so far, and make sure that you subscribe to this channel and don't miss any of my upcoming videos. Tip number 6 for anyone that's looking to start a new TPT store is that product previews and descriptions matter more than you think. I think a lot of sellers, including myself, at the beginning really underestimated how crucial or how impactful it is to have good quality previews of your work as well as a good description of what someone's gonna buy. When I first started designing my resources, my covers and my thumbnails didn't really help the buyer to understand like what they actually were buying. Like I wasn't giving them like actual previews of the resource. It was just like a bunch of text and like a bunch of like fun designs, but it really wasn't capturing what I was actually trying to sell them. I also was like a new teacher. Again, some of you might know this, but like teaching isn't like my first like career. I kind of pivoted into the career. But I wasn't always necessarily like using the proper like names of things. They were like things that ways that I describe something and not something that like maybe like a professional teacher might have used that word or would describe the resource. So there was a lot of like confusion in like what someone was actually buying from me. And so I had like this moment where I was maybe, I want to say like a good 30 or so resources in, and I wanted to do like a complete like rebrand, for a lack of a better word. But I went through every single resource. I decided like I want to take real photos of my resources whenever I can. Like I want someone to be able to actually see what they're buying. And I really did some work to kind of clean up the description so that it can help folks to really understand what they're buying. As you know, a lot of teachers, you know, when they're coming on TPT to buy something for their classroom, they're paying for this with their own money. You know, there are some teachers that might, you know, be able to purchase through like the school platform that like TPT offers. And so their school might be purchasing this, but majority of the teachers that are coming to buy your resources are doing so out of their own pockets. And we know that like in this country, teachers are like grossly underpaid. That discussion is for like another video, but if someone's gonna come and spend their hard-earned money, you know, they want it to be a good resource. So having them to actually be able to see what they're buying before they can actually make that decision, I think is really key. So you want to make sure that you're getting good quality photos of your work. You're really capturing in your description and in your previews what a teacher is actually going to be buying from you before they do. Tip number 7 for all new TPT sellers is about branding. And I'm not talking about the branding like having a specific font or having specific logos or anything like that. I just mean having some sense of consistency about what your brand is so that a buyer can distinguish you from other buyers on the platform. When you have a consistent brand, it just shows the buyer that like you know who you are, you know what you have to bring to the TPT marketplace, and that intention or that level of intention really helps to build that buyer trust. Branding can also help for buyers to recognize your work. If you have a specific way that you outline your resources, specific fonts, specific colors, if you have like a very distinguishable brand, teachers can be like, oh, like I've seen that work before. Branding can also kind of tie back into that whole piece about copyright. So if you have a very distinct brand and buyers associate that with you, then as they're going through looking at other resources and they kind of see that there's another kind of distinct brand that looks the same, ultimately it might bring them back to you and their thought might go back to you rather than going to that other person that they saw that resource from. Again, for me, my branding is just to use real photos. I have like the same 3 to 4 fonts that I like to stick to. I really kind of try to lay out my resources relatively in the same way. And it just like lets someone know that when they see a resource that looks like this, they're going to think of the teacher mindset. Tip number 8 is probably the most practical and again, one of the more overlooked tips, and that is to test your products before uploading. Now you're probably like, Chantel, like, why is this a tip? Like, no, duh, you should test your product before uploading. But y'all, I have been guilty with trying to meet like my own little personal deadline and like getting a resource up and not necessarily like looking at every single detail and testing out every single detail. I might test out like the first 2 lines and I'm like, girl, those 2 were great. You copied and pasted, whatever. It should be fine for the rest of the resource. And I've put a resource up that has, again, had a little bit of a mistake. Now, I am fortunate that, again, because a lot of people come to my store for like 10 of like my 200 products, that hasn't been that big of a deal. And most of those mistakes, if not all of those mistakes, I have ultimately been able to catch in my store before someone has purchased it. But you probably want to save yourself the like little bit of anxiety or panic by really just testing out to make sure everything works before you put it in your store. The last thing you want to do is have someone buy your resource and it doesn't hit the way it's supposed to be hitting, for a lack of a better word, and then they come and they leave a negative review on that product saying like, hey, I purchased this, it wasn't what I expected, it was full of errors, it like didn't, whatever the didn't is, and then that ultimately can impact the way that the resource sells ultimately in the end. I did have one product that I love the concept of it, but I wasn't able to like print it and fully test and see like what it looked like. And a teacher purchased it and she gave me some very, very, very like positive feedback. She ultimately left like a 1-star review on it, but the comments were very positive. And she said, hey, like, I really love the design of this, but ultimately when you go to print it, it doesn't scale the way that you are describing it in your resource, and I cannot use this in my classroom. Like, I bought this because I loved your design and ultimately I needed to be at this larger scale, but like no matter what we do, like what I do with the print, it does not come out the way that you intended it. And that was like very, very, very valuable feedback. Like, I am super thankful for that because again, it wasn't something that I printed out. Like, I designed it with the theory that it was going to scale the way that it was supposed to, but I didn't actually print it and test it to make sure that when the teacher bought it was going to do that. And ultimately this is what happens. And so I took that product down. It hasn't come back into my store yet because ultimately, again, I have not figured out how to scale it. You know, it wasn't an issue of like, you know, errors, but again, it's a product that you're supposed to be able to take to a printer and scale it, and it just wasn't doing that. And so until I can figure out how to fix that, I'm not going to bring it back into my store. And ultimately, till I test it to make sure that it works that way, again, I'm not going to bring it back into my store. But you definitely want to avoid those types of things by actually trying out your product. So if this is a product that's supposed to be like a print and play, actually print it and play it, you know, use it with your students, print it and play it. You know, if you're creating products that you're using with your students, you already kind of have that in proof of concept because your students are doing it. But again, you always want to make sure that you test your products before you upload them so that ultimately, again, teachers know what they're buying, and then when they do buy it, they don't have those issues like the example that I gave for you. Tip number 9 is to market your products. This is something that I'm working on a lot more. Again, I'm doing the work to come on camera, make YouTube videos, show you guys how I'm creating. I want to get back onto the other social media platforms a lot more. So marketing does matter, because you can have the world's greatest resource known to man, but if no one can find you, no one's going to be able to buy that resource. So there are a couple of things that you can do to help market your resource. The biggest thing is figuring out how to optimize your research within the actual Teachers Pay Teachers platform. So Teachers Pay Teachers is unique in that it is its own essential like marketplace, almost like its own Google site, right? Or search engine. And so a lot of the people that are going to find you, most likely when you're a new seller, is going to be through the actual search engine. So making sure your search engine optimized, making sure your thumbnails, your titles, your keywords, your previews, all of those other tips that we had talked about before, making sure that you optimize that is going to be the best way for someone to be able to find you in the actual TPT search engine. Do some time to actually promote your products through, TPT allows you to, I think like once a week or whatever it is, to be able to submit your product to be included as a freebie in their newsletter. They are always looking to highlight paid products in their newsletter. They're always looking to highlight new art or actual TPT authors. Now, those things are a lot harder to get recognized. I've been on the platform for like 6 years and I always do those things and like I never, get chosen. And so it's not going to necessarily mean that you are, but I do know some authors that they had like a key resource at a key time, when the pandemic happened. A lot of teachers didn't have resources in their store that were made for virtual learning, which is what the world was turning to. And a teacher author that I knew had a product that she had created in a timely manner and she submitted it to TPT. It was featured in the actual newsletter and that like took off for her store. So those types of opportunities, if you do get them, can be really great. I know there are some opportunities, if you have the funds for it, where you can actually pay to have your product, for a brief amount of time, boost it in the search engine. I'm not saying that you have to do any of those. I'm just telling you that those are opportunities out there to help to get your resource in front of folks within the Teachers Pay Teachers platform. So if any of those are right for you, I would say utilize them, but also utilize your network outside of the Teachers Pay Teachers platform. So if you have a social media presence, use that to talk about your resources. I am finding that I prefer long form content better. So I'm gravitating towards YouTube more than like a TikTok or a Instagram. And so I'm doing those. I love posting on Pinterest. So I post there. There's a lot of different ways that you can get your product out there. Starting your own mailing list. I have a mailing list. So I find like one or two ways that you want to market yourself and really dive into that. You might find that those aren't the best ways, that you're not necessarily getting the traffic that you might want to your store from that, and then use that data to pivot. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do one or the other. Find what works best for you. Dive into that, give it a couple of months, a couple of years, whatever it is that you feel as though your timeline, look at what those analytics are and pivot. But again, you have to do something to market yourself because there are so many TPT authors in the platform. You're competing with like millions and millions of resources. So if no one knows about you, they're not going to be able to buy from you. So make sure you find whatever marketing method works for you and stick to it. All right, folks, we have come to tip number 10 for this video, and that is to price your products realistically. Now, out of all of the tips that we've gone through, I think this one has been the hardest for me because when you are a new seller, I think the tendency is when you're putting up your products is that you want your product to be competitive versus authors that have been on the platform for a while. And so I think newer authors tend to underprice their resources as a way to like just trying to like help them get their foot in the door. But you don't necessarily want to do that for too long. So as I mentioned, my biggest selling resource in my store by far are sight words. You've heard that like 5 times in this video. I think we all get it. But when I first put that resource up there, I definitely like underpriced it by a lot. And once I saw that like this product, no, it's the real deal, people love it, I had to do like a price adjustment. And I have found that the price adjustment has in no way, shape, or form harmed the sales of my store. In fact, I think like it might be time to think of like another price adjustment, but we won't go there. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that you definitely don't want to undervalue your work, at least not for too long. Like maybe when you're first in your store, you might not necessarily feel like you're undervaluing your work. You might like feel like you're just trying to get your foot in the door. But I think it really is important to understand your worth and to know your worth. Making those price adjustments as you go along and like seeing where you truly land and like what the value of your resource truly is definitely okay. But as much as you can, try not to, if at all possible, to undervalue your work. So do your research, see what other similar products are selling for in the marketplace, and try to price yourself relatively accordingly. Getting those first couple of sales in are definitely, going to be the hardest part. But once you get over that hump and you are getting that following, you're getting folks to understand the real quality of your work, you definitely want to make sure that your prices reflect that. Because I remember in like year 2 or year 3, one of those 2 years, like I had like a big jump in terms of the number of products that I was selling in my store. And so obviously that equated to more money. And then I realized like I was undervaluing a lot of those resources that I had mentioned. And I made that shift. And like the next year, even though I didn't sell as many resources in terms of the numbers of resources, the amount of money that I made by far like jumped, because I felt like I was finally pricing my products what they were actually worth. And so that could be the trick to like growing your store, and maybe going through, seeing some of your best sellers, what those look like, as time goes, and saying like, am I priced according to what other teachers are selling? Like, what is someone selling that's comparable? And are the reviews similar to mine? Like, is someone getting more money for something that's like not getting as many like 5 stars as I am? And you'll learn those things over time, definitely, but it's definitely a little trick and a little bit of a balance that you have to do at the beginning to make sure that you're getting the prices within an acceptable range of what your work is worth. And that, my folks, brings us to the end of another video. I really hoped you guys liked this one and found one or even all of these tips very helpful as you are trying to make that decision to either start your store, or maybe you have and just want to kind of get some guidance. So if any of these tips resonated with you, again, leave a comment below. I would definitely like to know which one of these tips definitely you feel is going to help you the most. And if there are any tips that you have as a new seller or a veteran seller that you want to share with others, also leave those in the comments below. I would definitely love to hear some other tips that maybe I didn't mention. Before I go, I also want to remind you again to be sure to like this video, make sure you subscribe to my channel, and turn on that notification bell, because you don't want to miss when the next video is posted. That's all I have for you today, folks. So again, thank you for watching. Bye.